Now, recently I sold my M3, and since then I've been wondering what I'd replace it with. That led me to thinking about some of the cars I've owned, and that led to thinking about my favourites in an effort to understand where I might go next and what I might want. So today I thought I'd do something a bit different and just share my top 5 cars, not even in the garage today, the cars that I've owned so far. And you might be surprised by what's made the top 5. I've been lucky enough over the years to have owned quite a few cars. Some have been basic, some have been luxurious, and some have just been mental. To date, I have owned 26 cars in total, and that's broken down as 3 Fords. My first car was a 1980 something Fiesta Popular Plus, 950 Popular Plus. I've had 2 Vauxhalls, I've had a Peugeot, 4 Toyotas, 2 Volkswagens, I've had a TVR, a Lotus, an Audi, 2 Mercs, 6 Renaults, a Jag and a Radical. So I could go into detail about all of them, good and bad, but that isn't this video. I'm just going to tell you what has made my top 5 and why. So let's dive in. So number 5 is my Mercedes A-Class, my A220 CDI. This is my first experience with Mercedes, and I got the idea that I could just have one car to do both jobs. Bear in mind at the time they didn't have the A45. I don't think it had come out at that point, but the spec of the car was just way above like anything I'd owned previously. It was amazing. I got the car new. It's only the second new car I've ever bought, and I spec'd it exactly as I wanted it, with the sport pack in white and kind of with the bigger wheels and so on, stiffer springs, and I went for the semi-automatic paddle shift box. So not long after buying the car, I got a set of Dunlop Dureza 03G track tyres to go on the stock rims, and that was the extent of the mods that I did on that car. In 12 months with it, I did just over 10,000 trouble-free miles, which you'd expect, and I did 4 track days. And what I love most about the car was the interior. It just blows everything else out of the water. Mercedes nailed the interior with the A-Class, and it was the fact that I could just turn up to any track, and with no prep whatsoever, I could just grab a sandwich, grab a drink, take them out in the car and just do lap after lap in total comfort. And it was just focused purely on the driving. It wasn't the fastest car at any event, but in the wet at Brands Hatch, I remember it shone. It was a daily driver, basically. So all the other cars there were having trouble with the water and slipping and sliding around, and the Merc with all its kind of safety features, etc., that I just left on because I couldn't be arsed. So I overtook pretty much everything else all day. 1 tank of fuel. It was hilarious. Opened my eyes, that did. I never intended to keep it more than a year because of the finance plan that I got in the car. So I gave it back to Mercedes. That's why it went. And I was a happy man from the time that I had with it. I part exchanged it for another car on the list. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is my Audi A3 Cabriolet. Now, this car belonged to my mum, and I sadly inherited it from her last year when she died. I had considered selling it to buy a TT TFSI that I really fancied at the time, but I'm so glad I didn't settle, and now I couldn't and wouldn't sell it ever. I mean, this car will survive me, no doubt about that. Me and my mum, we bought it stock around 4 years ago. We paid £6,000 for it, I think. It had 60k on the clock, and it remained stock until I found myself stuck in the UK after my mum had passed. We were in the height of COVID, and it was my distraction from a truly terrible time in my life. I bought a set of rotiform wheels, I got Meister R coilovers, I did some trim upgrades like the front grille and the mirror backs and the rear diffuser, and I fitted a decent stereo system to the car, and that was all I did really, but that was enough to sort of raise it and make it something more than it was. Basically, it raised it enough. Why it's made the top 5, it's because of what it means to me and the memories that I have with it. It's the last car my mum owned, and it's a car that helped me move my life to Sweden recently, and I don't know, there's just something about having a cabriolet in your fleet that just makes any journey more of an experience. And that is really what makes a car special, the experience you have driving it and the memories that are tied to it. So let us move on to the top three. So in third position is my Megane 3 RS250 that I had, that was solo.lap. A lot of people kind of know it as. It's my third Renault, and it was at a strange time in my life. It was a time when I had young children and I wanted something resembling a daily driver to save my other car for more special occasions. So I bought it for just over 13k from K-Tech. I mean, they definitely saw me coming a mile away. It was a 2010 cut pack car in black. It had 29k on the clock. I think it had one owner, two owners, and only a few subtle mods. It was like a perfect base. And I was no stranger at the time to Renault Sport. I already had the 172 Cup track car. I had a Renault Twizy, and Renault Sport obviously responsible for the suspension on the Twizy. It was no shock then that the chassis and the overall package out of the box with the Megane was just something special. I mean, Renault Sport know how to do a chassis. Despite buying it for daily duties, I couldn't help but make some changes. And after I'd sold my other car, things kind of got out of hand. Needless to say, it ended up pretty unsuitable for general driving duties once I ditched the back seats and replaced most of the panels with fiberglass and carbon. Couldn't really ferry the kids around anymore. This was the car that I really started to hone my spannering skills on, and as I did, the car kind of took on its own personality, but it was like an extension of me at the same time. I had it for just over 3 years. It served me really well in that time, and the memories with that car will stay with me for a very long time. I called it my therapy dog because it got me through some tough but also some fun times. Why did I sell it? Well, because I felt like I'd done everything I wanted to do with it and I needed a new challenge. But it was also because, like, as a mark, the Megane and Renault Sport, the model particularly, it wasn't quite special enough to be something that you'd hold on to. And with it no longer being a daily driver and me being in Sweden, I kind of needed something performance-wise to be a daily driver. That's what I was thinking at the time. And it dawned on me that the cars that I was looking to buy for daily duties would actually be better overall cars, so things like a TTRS and E92 M3. It just didn't make sense for it to have a spot in the garage and be kept for like a weekend drive, where it just wasn't enough for that, if that makes sense. So I just couldn't justify keeping it. And at the time I was looking for something more grown up as a package, basically. And that brings me on to my number 2 car. So my number 2 car, this is going back a few years, this is before the Megane and other things. It was a Jaguar S-Type, believe it or not. So I know what you're thinking he has lost the plot. How old is he? Or when's he going to talk about his M3? But his M3 will be on here somewhere. But bear with me on this one, because as I said earlier, what makes a car special, it can be a combination of things, and those things are largely tied to an emotional connection, and this car sort of drew me in and nailed it. I bought it from an old guy on eBay for just over $5,000. Never expected to win it. Don't know what I was doing. It was like a crazy midnight bid. It had 60,000 miles on the clock, 2000 model. It had the Velvet 3-litre V6 automatic, sea frost green, full cream leather interior, walnut dash inlays, and the way it just glided along, just wrapping you up in this like stately home style interior, maybe old folks home to some. It's just something that I hadn't had before in a car, and that has stuck with me since. Just the memories that I had driving it to work early in the morning and things like that with a stereo on, and just it was great. It was effortless to drive. It was as strong as a tank. I actually crashed it twice and it won both crashes. So the first time was on the motorway where I went in the back of a Seicento, and I'm not joking, I just cracked the edge of the number plate. He lost the entire boot of his car up to his back seat, and he couldn't believe that my car just had no damage. And the second time I crashed it, I fell asleep driving it. It was on the M6 motorway early in the morning, and I went from the slow lane to the fast lane asleep, bounced off the central reservation, blew a tyre, and then went from the fast lane to the hard shoulder where I kind of pulled over, and all I'd done was obviously needed to replace the tyre, scratched down the side of the car, no other damage. It protected me. Being an idiot, just felt so good in that car. I racked up probably 70,000 miles in it over 3 years, and that's the highest mileage I've ever done in any car that I've owned. And those miles were in Europe, they were in the UK, and we go to Holland and places like that, and it never missed a beat, like not once. So it's earned its spot for all the trouble-free driving memories it gave me, and how it opened up my eyes to the fact that you don't always have to be crazy to be a good car. On to my number one. So my number one car so far, hands down, without question, was my C63 507 edition. It was everything that I enjoyed with the Jag, just immeasurably more of it in like every possible way. I bought it from Mercedes-Benz World in Surrey from the sales director there. It was his company car, so he'd spec'd it with everything. It was 2014, it was 6 months old when I got it, and it only had 6k on the clock, and it cost me almost £60,000, which was scary at the time. It was black with cream leather. It had the Alcantara black seat inserts, it had the Alcantara steering wheel, it had the tinted windows, the panel roof and the side decals, etc. And of course it had that unbelievable M156 6.2 litre engine. Now, being the 507, it shared the same engine as the SLS because it was end of life. You know, they never were going to do a big naturally aspirated engine again, God knows why. So they were using like the best parts that they had. It had the bonnet from the Black Series, it had a better exhaust, I think, Iceman, and you guessed it, 507 horsepower. So having just come from my A-Class Merc and a Lotus Exige that definitely didn't make this list, clearly I wanted a car that could do everything, and as it was costing me almost 700 quid a month in the sort of finance plan on it, it had to be a car that I wouldn't have to do much to get the most from and to like try and save money crazily. So the mods were simple. It was dechrome the car, debadge it, paint protection, definitely, Bilstein B16, coilovers. I got frequency, intelligent, valved, full exhaust, manifolds back with race cats, AFE, Pro Dry, air filters, and it had a remap at Eurocharged in Watford, who are no longer there, to 521 horsepower. The final kind of mod was a set of RS41 wheels from BC Racing. So they were 6.7 kg, I think, so they were 0.2 of a kg lighter than the forged ones that came with the car, and I kept the OEM wheels for putting track rubber on, and I was done. And in just over 12 months I racked up 8,000 miles, and most of which were on 8 track days I did in the UK. That's my record so far in the UK and Germany. And one of my favourite memories with the Merc was, well, there's loads. There was doing 165 mile an hour on the Autobahn with 4 wheels in the back, and my mate who had sold me the car actually from Mercedes-Benz World, travelling to the Nürburgring. And another memory was turning up for an evening session at Brands Hatch, and the other 4 cars, I think 3 cars that we went with, all of them broke down or had an issue, so they couldn't do any laps. So I was the only person lapping in the Merc, and I think I did 56 laps back to back in the evening. Like, all I needed was fuel, and it was just kind of like do a few laps, come into the pit, bib my horn, mate gets out, mate gets in, off we go again. Value for money was incredible. I've never done that before, never done that since. I had the car serviced at Mercedes-Benz World where I got it, and the mechanics loved seeing the car. They obviously knew the history of it, and they loved seeing the R888R rubber, like all with the bluing on the outer shoulder because of all the sort of track work, seeing the track rubber and debris on the front of the car and stuff. You know, this car was being used as it should be. So as I already said, this car had everything, and it did everything. It was the perfect car for me. Why did I sell it? It's something I regret to this day, and my time with Mercedes is not done. But I got caught up on the fact that it was a limited edition, so I started to get worried about putting miles on it. And as time went by, after this epic year of ownership, I was using it less and less and less, and I couldn't afford the nearly 700 quid a month being wasted essentially. So an opportunity came up to sell it, and that was that. Would I have another? No. but it's only because I kind of don't really believe in covering all ground directly, because there's so many cars that you want to own and so little time to own them. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this different video. Please let me know what your favorite cars have been so far and why. And let's end the video with a POV drive I did of Brands Hatch before the marshals told me to get that fucking camera off my head.